The bright yellow Imperial edict, resembling a death warrant, lay quietly on the rosewood table in the main hall. My dear Wanrong, you've endured 10 years of hardship as a wanderer, and after such a long struggle, you've finally found your way back to the Zhong family. How could the Emperor bear to send you to the North Frontier, that savage, inhospitable land, for a political marriage? Mrs. Zhong Wanrong's mother, held her daughter, who was sobbing uncontrollably, in her arms and wailed with heart-wrenching grief, as if the sky had fallen. Leaning against her mother's chest, Zhong Wanrong trembled like a leaf in the autumn wind, her delicate voice filled with terror. Mother, I won't marry. I've heard that Prince Huyan Lai of the Northern Frontier stands 8 feet tall, eats raw meat and drinks blood, and is a living king of hell who kills without batting an eye. If I go there, I'm sure to die in that bitterly cold land. I stood in the corner of the hall, watching the mother and daughter weep in each other's arms with a cold, detached gaze, yet my heart remained completely unmoved. Ever since my long-lost eldest sister, Zhong Wanrong, was found 10 years ago, my place in this family has become a complete joke. Because mother feels guilty, she gives Zhong Wanrong whatever she wants. My new clothes, my jewelry, my invitation to the Grand Princess's flower-viewing banquet, whenever Zhong Wanrong so much as glanced at any of them, mother would say to me in that heart-wrenching tone, Anren, your sister has suffered so much out there. Be a good girl and let her have it, won't you? I held back for 10 years, argued for 10 years, trying to prove that I, too, was her daughter, yet I never received even the slightest bit of her affection. Now, an imperial edict regarding the marriage alliance has reached the Zhong family, specifically naming Zhong Wanrong, the family's eldest daughter, to be married off to the Northern Frontier. With her life and family's honor at stake, she refuses to marry, and her mother cannot bear to let her go, so the choice of a scapegoat is, of course, self-evident. I saw my mother comforting Zhong Wanrong while casting a cautious glance in my direction with a look full of hints and pleading. Enough is enough. I just feel utterly exhausted. I don't want to spend even one more day living in someone else's shadow, never making my own firm choices. Ignoring my mother's disgusted look, I turned without hesitation and walked straight to my father's study. In the study, his father, Minister Zhong, stood with his hands behind his back, pacing back and forth anxiously like an ant on a hot pan. Defying the imperial decree was a capital offense punishable by the execution of the entire family, yet the thought of actually marrying off his most beloved eldest daughter to the Northern Frontier filled him with 1,001 regrets. Hearing the door creak open, my father spun around. When he saw it was me, his brow immediately furrowed. You have no manners. Who told you to come in? Can't you see our family is going through a terrible ordeal? I walked forward calmly, without kneeling, but merely bowed slightly, my voice as cold as ice. Father, there is no need to worry. I am willing to go to the Northern Frontier in my sister's place to seal the alliance through marriage. My father froze, his eyes wide with disbelief. Anren, what are you saying? Do you have any idea what the Northern Frontier is like? Do you know what a political marriage means? Of course I know, I said, looking him straight in the eye without flinching. It means leaving the capital forever, and it means we may never see each other again in this lifetime. But I'm willing to go. Although my sister's name is written on the Imperial Edict, the Ministry of Rights Registry probably hasn't been sealed and submitted yet. Given father's network of connections, which he has cultivated over many years in the imperial court, it surely wouldn't be difficult to find a way to replace the name Zhong Wanrong with Zhong Anren before the registers are verified. A gleam flashed in my father's eyes. He was a politician through and through. The moment he heard this proposal, his mind was certainly not on my life or death, but rather on the feasibility of the plan and the interests of the Zhong family. All the imperial court needed was a woman from the Zhong family to pacify the Northern Frontier. As for whether it was the eldest or second daughter who went, those in power simply didn't care. As long as it was handled properly, this would not only save his most beloved eldest daughter but also preserve the Zhong family's reputation for sharing the nation's burdens. Anren, have you really thought this through? My father's voice couldn't help but take on a feigned tremor. I know that over the years, our family has let you down in many ways. Father, there's no need for these hypocritical platitudes, I interrupted him ruthlessly. I'll go in her place, just to repay you for the past dozen or so years of raising me. From now on, I, Zhong Anren, owe the Zhong family nothing. All you need to tell me is this: are you going to exchange this roster, or not? My father was silent for a moment, then finally nodded firmly. All right. I'll go right away and make arrangements with my former colleagues at the Ministry of Rights. Anren, the Zhong family will remember your great kindness. I gave a wry smile, didn't say another word, and turned to walk out of the study. Remember my great kindness? That kind of nonsense would only fool a 3-year-old. My father acted with remarkable speed. In less than half a day, he had spent a fortune to pull some strings and, without anyone noticing, had the name on the marriage alliance registry changed to mine. That evening, the atmosphere in the Zhong household underwent a dramatic change. The gloom that had hung over them was swept away, and a sumptuous banquet was laid out in the main hall. The tear stains on his mother's face had long since been washed away, replaced by unbridled joy. After dinner, my mother personally brought out an exquisite Wangwali box, walked over to me, and opened it. Inside lay more than a dozen round, plump, and dazzlingly lustrous South Sea pearls. Anren, you've been treated unfairly this time, the Zhong family owes you an apology. My mother took my hand, her voice filled with a rare gentleness and tenderness. These South Sea pearls in this box are a recent tribute from the South China Sea, they're extremely rare. Since you're about to get married, pick out a few of your favorites, and I'll have someone make you a set of exquisite jewelry. I lowered my gaze and looked at the South Sea pearls. Even at this so-called moment of compensation, the pearls in this box were nothing more than lifeless objects. I reached out, my fingertips about to touch the largest of them, a top-quality South Sea pearl with a faint pink sheen. Just then, Zhong Wanrong, who was standing nearby, suddenly took a soft breath, bit her lower lip, and fixed her gaze intently on the pink bead, her eyes brimming with undisguised longing. My mother's body stiffened instinctively, and she blurted out almost without thinking, Anren. This pink bead has a rather alluring hue. Your sister has always loved pink, it would look absolutely perfect as a pendant for her. I think that white bead suits you better. It's dignified and graceful, just right for your future role as a princess. Don't you agree? Here we go again. No matter when or where, no matter how great a sacrifice I made, as long as Zhong Wanrong wanted something, mother's scales would immediately and without hesitation tip in her favor. Even if I were about to take her place in what they called hell, in mother's eyes, it still wouldn't matter as much as a single glance from Zhong Wanrong. At that moment, my heart turned completely into a pool of stagnant water, unable to create even the slightest ripple. I slowly withdrew my hand, flicked my fingertips, and casually picked up the plain white bead lying nearby. My tone was calm, without a hint of emotion. Mother is right, this white one is just fine. Since you like it, sister, you can have all the rest. A smug smile immediately spread across Zhong Wanrong's face, and her mother let out a sigh of relief, repeatedly praising me for being sensible and considerate. As I watched this heartwarming scene of a loving mother and daughter, I felt as though the air in the room was suffocating. 2 days later, the Imperial delegation sent by the court arrived in grand procession at the gates of the Zhong family estate. Because I had stepped in for Zhong Wanrong and resolved the court's urgent crisis, the emperor was overjoyed. Not only did he formally confer upon me the title of Princess of Yongnan, but he also bestowed an extremely generous dowry. Pallets of rosewood chests filled with fine silks and rare treasures were carried into the Zhong family's courtyard, their dazzling golden glow nearly blinding everyone present. The most eye-catching item among them was an imperial bestowed phoenix hairpin inlaid with peacock feathers, placed separately in a brocaded box, a symbol of the princess's status and a treasure of unparalleled splendor. Zhong Wanrong stood to one side, staring wide-eyed, the flames of jealousy nearly bursting from the depths of her eyes. My mother looked at the mountain of gifts, her eyes darting back and forth, then turned to me and said, Anren, the northern frontier is such a remote and impoverished place, what use would they have for such exquisite and valuable items? Taking them there would be a waste. Why not set aside half of them for your sister's future dowry? That way, the emperor's kindness won't have been in vain. Just as I was about to refuse, I saw that Joan Wanrong could no longer contain herself. Taking everyone by surprise, she walked straight up to the brocaded box and snatched up the Imperial jade-inlaid phoenix hairpin. This hairpin is truly beautiful, I'm sure it'll look much better on me than on you. Joan Wanrong smugly held the phoenix hairpin up to her bun, completely oblivious to the fact that the senior palace matron, who had been sent to instruct her on proper etiquette, had already grown utterly grim-faced. You want what I have? This time, if I don't flay her alive, I'll have been the princess of Yolin for nothing. Joan Wanrong tucked the imperial phoenix hairpin inlaid with peacock feathers diagonally into her cloud-like hair, tilting her head left and right as she gazed into the bronze mirror, her face brimming with unmasked greed and smug satisfaction. Anrin, just look at the design of this phoenix hairpin, it clearly complements my complexion better. She turned around, raised an eyebrow at me as if to show it off, her tone carrying her usual air of arrogance. Anyway, since you're going to such a harsh and frigid place, wearing such an extravagant piece of jewelry for those barbarians to see is like playing the lute to a cow. I'll just keep this hairpin. I didn't say a word. I just watched quietly as she brought it on herself. Standing nearby, the palace matron Lu's face had turned so dark it looked as if ink might drip from it. As a longtime servant in the Empress's quarters, Lu had spent decades navigating the cutthroat world of the Imperial Palace. She placed the utmost importance on rules and propriety, and had never before witnessed such an arrogant display of ignorance, a complete disregard for the hierarchy and respect due to one's superiors. You audacious scoundrel! Before Joan Wanrong could finish boasting, Matron Lu suddenly stepped forward, and a sharp shout rang out through the main hall like a clap of thunder, causing Joan Wanrong to shudder and instinctively reach up to cover her ears. This phoenix hairpin inlaid with peacock feathers was personally inscribed by the Emperor and bestowed upon Princess Yongin as part of her ceremonial regalia. You, a lowly commoner with no rank or status, dared to presumptuously wear an imperial gift and even attempt to seize it by force? How many heads do you have that are worth cutting off? Aunt Lu's voice boomed, every word and phrase carrying the force of a thunderclap. Without giving Joan Wanrong a chance to react, she strode forward, grabbed Joan Wanrong by the collar, raised her hand, and with a loud smack, delivered a solid slap to her delicate cheek. The slap was sharp and resounding, sending Joan Wanrong reeling and causing her to tumble to the ground. The exquisite jade feather phoenix hairpin slipped from her hair and fell onto the blue brick floor with a crisp, mournful clink. Several slender jade feathers were shaken loose by the impact, a sight that tugged at the heartstrings. Ah! My face! Joan Wanrong clutched her cheek, which was rapidly swelling and turning red, and screamed in disbelief as tears instantly welled up in her eyes. You old hag, how dare you hit me? This is for you, you insolent, lowly servant who knows no place. Matron Lu's gaze was as sharp as a knife. Her tears did not soften her heart in the slightest. She took a step forward, bent down to pick up the phoenix hairpin, carefully blew the dust off it, then turned and looked coldly at Joan Wanrong. Guards! Drag this audacious wretch away and slap her across the face 10 times. Let her learn her lesson and understand what Imperial protocol is all about. The two burly, strong palace maids who had accompanied Aunt Lu immediately pounced on her like wolves and tigers, pinning Joan Wanrong firmly to the ground, one on her left and one on her right. Only then did Mrs. Joan snap out of her daze. She screamed and rushed forward, trying to shield her precious daughter. Madam, please calm down. Have mercy. Wanrong is young and naive, she made a mistake because she was playing around. I beg you, for her father's sake, to spare her this time. Mr. Joan's reputation? Matron Lu let out a cold laugh, her tone laced with sarcasm. Mr. Joan has failed to raise his daughter properly. He has allowed her to embezzle imperial gifts. This is a grave offense of disrespect. If Mrs. Joan dares to interfere again, this old servant will report the matter truthfully to Her Majesty the Empress upon returning to the palace, and both Mr. Joan and his wife will be punished. Those words were like a bucket of ice water poured over Mrs. Joan's head, completely freezing what little sanity she had left. She froze in her tracks, her face ashen, watching helplessly as the two lowly palace maids raised their hands high. Smack! 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 The sharp crack of a slap echoed through the spacious main hall, each one accompanied by Zhong Wanrong's heart-wrenching screams. The young lady, who had always been pampered and couldn't bear to hear even a harsh word, now lay on the floor with her hair in disarray and blood trickling from the corner of her mouth, wailing and writhing like a stray dog. I stood there watching this satisfying scene unfold, feeling nothing but immense relief. For the past 10 years, relying on her mother's favoritism, she has lorded it over me, taking everything from me, and even after learning of the Imperial edict ordering the marriage alliance, she watched with a clear conscience as I went into the fire for her. Now, she has finally paid the price for her greed and arrogance. After 10 slaps, Zhong Wanrong's face was already swollen like a pig's head, and she couldn't even utter a complete sentence. She slumped weakly to the ground, staring at me with a look full of venom, as if I had ordered Auntie Lu to hit her. Princess Yonglin, this phoenix hairpin is damaged. This old servant will take it back to the Imperial Household Department to have it repaired and bring it back to you tomorrow. Matron Lu carefully put the phoenix hairpin away, turned to me, and performed a proper court curtsy, her tone so respectful that she seemed like a completely different person from just a moment ago. "Thank you, Auntie," I said, nodding slightly, my expression calm, as if the woman wailing on the ground had nothing to do with me. Madame Lu's cold, piercing gaze swept over Lady Zhong and Zhong Wanrong once more. Raising her voice, she warned them, enunciating each word clearly, "This old servant has served in the palace for decades. I've seen every sort of demon and monster imaginable. Listen to me carefully. Princess Yonglin is now a member of the Imperial family representing the Kingdom of Dayuan, marrying into the northern frontier. Her status is of the highest honor. Anyone who dares to show even the slightest disrespect toward the princess, or who harbors any ill intentions toward her dowry, will be considered an enemy of the entire Imperial family. Even though she is about to marry far away, as long as this old servant remains in the capital, I will not tolerate anyone humiliating the princess in the slightest." These words were not only meant for the Zhong family, they also gave me a solid source of support. Aunt Lu led the palace maids away in a grand procession. A deathly silence fell over the main hall, broken only by Zhong Wanrong's stifled sobs. "Mrs. Zhong was so heartbroken she couldn't stop crying. She wanted to step forward to help Zhong Wanrong up, but, mindful of Matron Lu's warning from earlier, she didn't dare go too far. She turned to look at me, her eyes filled with reproach and pleading. "Anren, why? Why don't you speak up and plead for your sister? She's your own sister, after all." "Mother has lost her mind," I said, staring at her coldly. "That is an imperial gift, it represents the dignity of the imperial family. If she were to step outside wearing that hairpin today, it wouldn't end with just 10 slaps. The fact that I haven't had her dragged off to the Ministry of Justice is a sign that I'm sparing her out of sisterly consideration. But what about the dowry?" Mrs. Zhong wasn't ready to give up and wanted to bring up the matter of dividing the dowry again. That was a gift from the Emperor to Princess Yonglin, not to the Zhong family. I cut her off bluntly, my gaze as cold as ice. If Mother really wants it, she's more than welcome to ask the Emperor for it herself. After saying that, I paid no further attention to the mother and daughter and turned around, walking straight back to my own courtyard. Over the next few days, no one in the Zhong family dared to set their sights on my dowry again. Zhong Wanrong was beaten so badly that she stayed locked in her room, and my mother put an end to her ridiculous schemes. The entire Zhong household was shrouded in an eerie, oppressive atmosphere. However, this calm did not last long. Just 3 days before I was set to leave for northern Xinjiang, my mother came to my courtyard once again. This time, she didn't bring anything with her, but her face wore an extremely complex expression, partly one of guilt, partly one of some kind of twisted smugness. "Anren, your father has already arranged a marriage for your older sister." My mother sat across from me, her eyes shifting nervously, unable to look me in the eye. It's Lu Jing, the heir to the Earl of Ching'en's household." Lu Jing. When I heard that name, it felt as if an invisible hand had gently squeezed my heart. He was the young man I once loved with all my heart. We grew up together as childhood sweethearts, and countless times, under the blossoms and moonlight, he promised me that once he had achieved fame and fortune, he would come to marry me in a palanquin carried by 8 men. But then, Zhong Wanrong returned. She was drawn to Lu Jing's gentle and refined demeanor and to the prestigious lineage of the Earl of Chang'an's household. To make it up to her, my mother forcibly tore us apart and forced this marriage upon Zhong Wanrong. Back then, I had pleaded with Lu Jing, begging him not to agree. But he simply avoided my gaze and sighed, saying that he couldn't defy his parents' wishes or the matchmaker's words. From that moment on, I knew that no one in this world would ever choose me without hesitation. Is that so? Well, congratulations, sister. I picked up my teacup, took a gentle sip, and spoke in a tone so calm that even I was surprised by it. Seeing how unmoved I was, my mother seemed a little puzzled. She had expected me to be angry, upset, or even throw a fit. But I didn't. Just then, a series of hurried footsteps could be heard outside the door. Zhong Wanrong, whose facial redness and swelling had subsided by more than half, brushed aside her maidservant's attempts to stop her and strode in with an air of arrogance. She clutched tightly in her hand a jade pendant of exceptional quality, a personal keepsake belonging to Lu Jing. Zhong Anren, did you hear that? Lu Jing is going to marry me. She slammed the jade pendant down on the table, tilted her head back, and looked at her with the smug triumph of a victor. In the end, he chose to stay in the capital, and he chose me. As for you, you'll have to go to that godforsaken place and be that barbarian's plaything. She thought this would provoke me and that she'd get to see me break down. But I just set down my teacup and watched her quietly, as if she were a clown. Are you done showing off? I stood up, walked over to her, and looked down at her. Zhong Wanrong, do you really think you've snatched up some rare treasure? Only someone like you would treat a coward, one who can't even protect the person he loves, as if he were a precious treasure. I turned to look at my mother, my voice as cold as frost. Whether it's Lu Jing or the Zhong family, the things you hold so dear are now worthless in my eyes. In 3 days, I'll set out for the northern frontier, and from then on, we'll be separated by vast mountains and rivers. We'll never meet again, not in life nor in death. As for you all, you'd better take care of yourselves. I stared coldly at Zhong Wanrong's face, which was slightly contorted with anger, feeling not the slightest stir in my heart. Stop acting all high and mighty. Zhong Wanrong, like a cat whose tail had been stepped on, suddenly raised her voice, digging her fingernails deep into the palms of her hands. You're clearly dying of jealousy inside. You've had a crush on Brother Lu since you were a kid, do you think I don't know that? Now that he's my fiancé, you're going to be buried alive with some barbarian. You're just putting on a brave face. She was desperate to find even the slightest sign of weakness on my face, to prove that the plundering she had been meticulously planning for the past 10 years had been worth it. She needed my pain to fill the void in her heart. Seeing this, my mother hurried forward to hold Zhong Wanrong back. It seemed as though she was trying to smooth things over, but in reality, every word she spoke felt like a knife stabbing me in the heart. Anren, don't blame your sister. Your father arranged this marriage. The Lu family's heir is exceptional in both character and appearance. He truly is a good match for your sister. You're about to marry far away, so don't let these old, trivial matters drive a wedge between you and your sister. Besides, even if you harbor resentment, you must think of the Zhong family. Only when you're in the northern frontier and your sister has found a good home in the capital can the Zhong family find peace. I listened quietly to this utterly absurd speech, and suddenly burst out laughing. Mother is truly calculating. I looked at her, the last trace of warmth gone from my eyes. She traded my life for the Zhong family's stability and for Zhong Wanrong's bright future. Now that she's stolen the man I love, she expects me to thank her and congratulate her? Since mother thinks Lu Jing is so wonderful, let her keep him close, so he doesn't get snatched away by someone else one of these days. As for me, what does the Zhong family's stability have to do with me? I turned my back on them and, in a cold tone, told them to leave. Get out. Don't dirty my yard. Jean Wanrong was livid and was about to yell some more, but her mother forcibly dragged her away. Before leaving, she didn't forget to shoot me a withering glare. Silence returned to the room. I walked over to the window and looked out at the osmanthus tree in the courtyard, which was on the verge of withering. Lu Jing. That name was once the warmest dream of my teenage years. I thought that as long as I was well-behaved and worked hard enough, one day I would have everything I wanted. But as it turned out, in the face of power and self-interest, all emotions are no match. Jean Wanrong thought she had stolen the very essence of my being, but she didn't realize that the moment I decided to go to the northern frontier in her place, the once timid, love-starved Zhong Anren had already died. Standing here today is Princess Yongin, who is about to become the princess consort of the northern frontier. I will never shed another tear for anyone who isn't worth it. 3 days later, at dawn, the sky was just beginning to lighten. Outside the Zhong family's main gate, the massive wedding procession was already assembled and ready to depart. Though the carriages and horses were draped in red silk, they could not mask the somber and desolate atmosphere. The people of the capital were all whispering among themselves, sympathizing with the unfortunate princess who was about to be sent to hell. Wearing that elaborate and magnificent princess gown, with the Imperial jade-inlaid phoenix hairpin, which had been carefully repaired, adorned my hair, I slowly walked out through the gates of the Zhong family estate, surrounded by a retinue of palace maids and matron attendants. My father and mother stood on the steps, looking at me with mixed expressions. Jean Wanrong didn't show up. Perhaps she was afraid I'd change my mind, or perhaps she was so caught up in the joy of her upcoming marriage to Lu Jing that she couldn't be bothered to come see me off, this cast-off pawn. Anren. My father moved his lips as if to say something, but in the end, it came out as nothing more than a sigh. The journey ahead is long and arduous. You must take good care of yourself. If that prince of the northern frontier has a short temper, just bear with it, don't provoke him. Patience? I let out a cold laugh, staring straight at him. Rest assured, father. Since I've taken Zhong Wanrong's place, I will, of course, fulfill my duties as princess consort. However, my time as a daughter of the Zhong family ends today. Once I step through that door, whether I live or die, I will have no further connection to the Zhong family. After saying that, I didn't spare them another glance. I stepped onto the footstool and resolutely climbed into the magnificent carriage. Let's go! Accompanied by the ceremonial officials' drawn-out chant, the wheels began to turn slowly, grinding against the bluestone pavement and emitting a dull thud. The moment the carriage left the capital, I pulled back the curtain and took one last look at this bustling metropolis that had held me captive for more than a decade. I felt no reluctance, no lingering attachment, only a sense of relief at having broken free from my prison. As the procession made its way north, the landscape grew increasingly desolate. The rolling mountains were blanketed in yellow sand, and the biting wind cut across their faces like knives. The court ladies traveling with them all wore expressions of fear and wept softly, as if they were walking toward the execution ground. But I find that the howling wind sounds much more pleasing to the ear than all the hypocritical pleasantries and scheming in the capital. After a 2-month-long journey, we finally arrived at the royal court in northern Xinjiang. It wasn't as dilapidated and desolate as I had imagined. Although the royal court was built of boulders and logs, it exuded a rugged and majestic aura. The endless rows of tents intertwined with the sturdy city walls, radiating a wild vitality. The carriage came to a stop in the central square of the royal court. I took a deep breath and, supported by Aunt Lu, slowly stepped down from the carriage. The square was already filled with nobles and generals from the northern frontier. Dressed in heavy fur coats, they stared intently at me, a delicate young woman from the Central Plains. I could sense the contempt and suspicion in their eyes. In their view, women from the Central Plains were like flowers grown in a greenhouse, utterly unable to withstand the bitter cold and sandstorms of the northern frontier. Just then, the crowd parted of its own accord, and a tall, upright figure strode out from behind them. He was a burly man, clad in dark gold battle armor and draped in a heavy white wolf fur cloak over his shoulders. His bronze-colored skin glowed with a cold, hard sheen in the sunlight, and his deep, piercing eyes were like a dark, icy pool, exuding an aura of authority that commanded respect without the need for anger. This was the man of legend, the prince of the northern frontier, Huyen Lai, who ate raw meat and drank blood and killed without batting an eye, a living lord of the underworld. He walked up to me and looked down at me from above. His overwhelmingly intimidating presence made the air around us seem to freeze. The palace maids behind me were trembling with fear, not even daring to breathe. I met his gaze without flinching or showing any sign of fear. I simply lifted my chin slightly, stood up straight, and let him look me over. This is my future husband. Even if he were a demon, I would never bow down before him. Huyen Lai stared at me for a long time, then the corners of his stern mouth suddenly curled into a barely perceptible smile. He reached out with his calloused, broad, rough hands, but instead of yanking me toward him roughly as the rumor suggested, his touch was unexpectedly gentle as he took my hand firmly in his. His hands were warm. The warmth from his palms seeped through the thin sleeves of his shirt, and it actually made my long cold heart feel a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in a long time. "You're much bolder than I imagined," he said, his voice low and hoarse, with a thick northern frontier accent, yet not at all grating. "Your Highness, you flatter me," I replied calmly. Since Anren has been ordered to enter into a political marriage, she is now the princess consort of the northern frontier. And as the princess consort, she has no fear of wind and sand. A glimmer of admiration flashed in Huyen Lai's eyes. He said nothing more, but simply took my hand, turned to face all the tribes of the northern frontier, raised my hand high, and announced in a deafening voice, "From this day forward, she, Zhong Anren, is my, Huyen Lie's, official consort. She is the wolf queen of my northern frontier." A deafening roar of cheers erupted across the square. As I looked at this man beside me, as indestructible as a mountain, a strange feeling I'd never experienced before suddenly welled up inside me. Perhaps this bitterly cold northern frontier isn't as terrifying as they say. Weddings in northern Xinjiang aren't as full of formalities as those in the Central Plains. There's no jumping over a brazier, no red veil, and certainly no lengthy toasts or elaborate kowtows. I changed into a red ceremonial robe unique to the northern frontier, with golden wolf totems embroidered on the lapels and cuffs, and wore a headdress inlaid with agate and turquoise. It was heavy, yet it no longer carried the oppressive opulence of the capital. Instead, it exuded a rugged and free-spirited flair. On the night of the wedding, blazing bonfires were lit throughout the royal court. People gathered around the fires, singing and dancing, eating meat heartily, and drinking from large bowls. Huyen Lai pulled me over and seated me on the main seat, made of animal hides, right in the center. Looking at the bustling, vibrant scene before me, I felt as if I had stepped into another world. Here, no one cared whether I was a legitimate or illegitimate child. No one secretly compared my living standards to those of Zhong Wanrong. And no one treated me with that condescending, patronizing attitude. After 3 rounds of drinking, Huyen Lai dismissed everyone and took me back to the king's tent. The tent was covered with thick cashmere rugs, and a charcoal fire, giving off a faint scent of pine and cypress, burned, completely shielding the interior from the biting cold of the northern frontier night. I sat on the edge of the bed, still feeling a bit uneasy. Although he had shown me a rare degree of respect earlier that day, he was, after all, a battle-hardened general with a reputation for cruelty. Rumors described him as brutal and bloodthirsty. What if he... My hand unconsciously clenched the hem of my shirt. Huyen Lai walked up to me. His towering figure blocked the light, casting me completely into his shadow. He looked at my tense shoulders and suddenly let out a soft chuckle. The laugh was deep and rich, sounding particularly clear in the quiet tent. "Are you afraid of me?" He knelt on one knee in front of me, looking me straight in the eye. There was no ferocity in those deep eyes, only a reassuring calm. "Rumor has it that I eat raw meat and drink blood. Did you believe it?" I looked at his face, which was just inches away. That stern face bore a few faint scars, but they didn't make him look fierce. Instead, they added a touch of rugged masculinity and determination. "I believe what I see." I took a deep breath and gradually relaxed my tense body. The prince's palm is very warm, he doesn't seem like a cold, lifeless lord of the underworld. The smile on Huyanlai's lips deepened. He reached out, and the rough pads of his fingers gently brushed against the headpiece on my head, a movement so incredibly gentle, as if he were afraid of shattering a priceless treasure. I've long heard of those old foxes in the Central Plains. They treat that imperial edict as a death warrant and are pushing you forward as a scapegoat. His tone suddenly turned cold and hard, tinged with a hint of contempt. As for that woman named Wanrong, I've had her investigated. She's all affectation and pretense, a complete pushover. If she were to show up, I wouldn't even give her a second glance. I was taken slightly aback. I hadn't expected him to have uncovered every sordid detail of what was going on in the capital. He looked me in the eyes, his tone solemn and earnest. Zhong Anren, listen carefully. Here, you no longer need to curry favor with anyone, nor do you need to give an inch. You are my princess. These 1,000-league grasslands of the northern frontier, everything you can see belongs to you. If you want to ride a horse, I'll teach you. If you want to shoot a bow, I'll make you the finest bow. As long as you don't betray me, I, Hu Yanlai, will protect you for the rest of your life. Those words struck my guarded heart like a sledgehammer, instantly shattering all my defenses. For more than a decade, I've been desperately trying to prove myself and earn even a little bit of favor, only to be met with disappointment and betrayal time and time again. And now, in this bitterly cold place 1,000 li away from the capital, this man, whom everyone regards as a devil, has, in the most direct and domineering way, given me the promise I've longed for most. That night, outside the tent, the wind and snow raged, but inside, it was as warm as spring. Although Huyanlai's movements were clumsy, they exuded a cautious tenderness. He did not force himself on me, but guided me with patience and gentleness. I finally realized that the terrifying rumors about him were nothing more than a weapon used by the northern frontier to intimidate its enemies. My time in northern Xinjiang was much more relaxed and enjoyable than I had expected. There were no rules requiring morning and evening visits, no open or covert intrigues within the household. I took off my elaborate brocade skirt and put on a sleek riding outfit. Hu Yanlai kept his promise. Whenever he had free time, he would take me out to ride across the vast grasslands. He taught me how to find my bearings, how to use a recurve bow, and how to stay balanced on horseback. At first, I kept falling, but he never mocked me. He would simply help me up in silence, brush the grass clippings off my clothes, and patiently guide me once more. In less than 2 months, I was already able to ride a fiery steed on my own, galloping freely through the wind. That sense of freedom as I raced against the wind was something I hadn't even dared to dream of within the confines of the capital. Besides Hu Yanlai, I also met another person who made me feel warm, Hu Yanlai's younger sister, Aya. Aya is a typical girl from northern Xinjiang, cheerful and fiery, and she doesn't understand the subtle, roundabout ways of women from the Central Plains at all. Erin, sister-in-law. Look at the wild rabbit I caught. One day, as I was sitting outside my tent soaking up the sun, Aya came rushing over like a gust of wind, carrying 2 plump, gray rabbits. Her face was smeared with mud, but her eyes sparkled like those of a puppy seeking praise. Aya, you're so amazing, I said with a smile as I took out a handkerchief and wiped the dirt off her face. That's right. Aya lifted her chin proudly. Big brother said you're too skinny, sister-in-law, and you need to eat some meat to gain some weight. Tonight we're having roasted rabbit. She pulled me down to sit on the grass, and as she skillfully prepared the rabbit, she asked me curiously, sister-in-law, are women in the Central Plains locked up in their rooms every day and not allowed to go out? I've heard you're not even allowed to take big steps when you walk, that must be so uncomfortable. That's right, I said, looking into her clear eyes, untainted by the world, and feeling a bit emotional. There are so many rules, one wrong move, and people will start pointing fingers. Our northern frontier is still the best. Aya patted her chest. Here, as long as you've got what it takes, even men will listen to you. Sister-in-law, you can stay here with peace of mind from now on. If anyone dares to bully you, I'll set a wolf on them. Hearing her straightforward and sincere defense, I couldn't help but laugh out loud. Here, there is no biased mother, no pretentious elder sister, and certainly no hypocritical, cowardly ex-lover. I have a husband who treasures me, a sincere and warm-hearted younger sister, and a vast world where I can roam freely. This is the peace and happiness I've always dreamed of. And all of this is something I earned by bravely taking that first step myself. Time is like a wild horse galloping across the prairie, it passes in the blink of an eye. Before they knew it, the northern frontier was blanketed by its first heavy snowfall, and the year-end tribute season arrived. As the princess consort of northern Xinjiang, I must, of course, accompany Hui Enlai back to the capital to attend the imperial year-end ceremony. Before I left, Aya held my hand reluctantly and pressed a large bag of dried beef into my hands. Sister-in-law, if those people in the capital dare to give you a hard time, just tell Big Brother, he'll definitely teach them a lesson. I smiled and patted the back of her hand. Don't worry. I'm not the same Zhong Anren anymore, the one who used to let people push me around. After bumping along through the snow and ice for nearly 2 months, the carriage finally rolled back into the capital, which remained as bustling as ever. Returning to this familiar place, my state of mind was now completely different. As I looked at the familiar shops lining the streets and the bustling crowds, I felt as if I were watching a play that had nothing to do with me. On New Year's Eve, the Imperial Palace was aglow with lights, and the sounds of string and wind instruments filled the air. With my arm linked through Hui Enlai's, I walked into the Hall of Supreme Harmony. Tonight, instead of wearing those elaborate Central Plains court robes, I chose a set of attire unique to the northern frontier, the uniform of a princess consort. My deep blue velvet robe was embroidered with a soaring eagle and gold thread, and the collar and cuffs were trimmed with precious snow fox fur. On my head, I wore the crimson gold crown that symbolizes the wolf queen of the northern frontier. This outfit stood out like a sore thumb among the noble women of the Central Plains, who were dressed in sheer gauze gowns and adorned with pearls and jade, yet it exuded an indescribable wildness and dominance that instantly captured everyone's attention. The hubbub inside the main hall paused briefly. Without looking away, I followed Hui Enlai to the seats reserved for the envoys from the northern frontier and took my seat, calmly accepting the curious, probing, and jealous glances from those around me. Among those gazes, I keenly detected 2 that were filled with hostility and shock. Following my line of sight, I saw Mrs. Zhong and Zhong Wanrong sitting in the women's section. Zhong Wanrong was dressed to the nines in a magnificent peony-patterned cloud brocade gown, her hair adorned with a profusion of golden hairpins. Yet her expression was utterly grim. Her eyes were fixed intently on the princess consort's uniform I was wearing, and the jealousy in them was so intense it seemed as if it might burst forth as tangible venom. Lu Jing, standing beside her, was also looking at me with a complex expression, his eyes seeming to hold a hint of disbelief and regret. I just find it ridiculous. What is there to regret? Do you regret giving up on me back then, or do you regret not seeing how high and mighty I am now? After a few rounds of drinks, the atmosphere gradually became more lively. The emperor sat on the dragon throne, smiling warmly at Hui Enlai. Prince of the northern frontier, Princess Yong'an has been married to the northern frontier for over half a year now. Has she settled in yet? Hui Enlai stood up, raised his wine cup, and spoke in a voice as resonant as a bell. Your Majesty, the princess consort is doing well in the northern frontier. Not only has she adapted to the climate there, but she has also learned to ride horses and shoot arrows. She is the wolf queen whom the people of the northern frontier hold in the highest esteem. As soon as these words were spoken, a wave of subdued gasps rippled through the hall. The nobles of the Central Plains could not imagine that a delicate young lady from a distinguished family could live so freely and boldly in such a harsh and frigid land. Just then, a sharp, piercing sound suddenly rang out in the hall, shattering the harmonious atmosphere. Ha! What wolf queen? She's nothing but a coarse woman steeped in barbarian ways. It was Zhong Wanrong who spoke. She seemed to have had a few too many drinks. The gentle, delicate demeanor she usually put on had vanished without a trace, replaced by a face full of jealousy and hatred. She stood up, pointed at the clothes I was wearing, and said mockingly in a loud voice, "Your Majesty, look at her. She's a princess of the great Dayuan kingdom, yet she dares to attend a state banquet wearing such crude garments sewn from animal hides. She's utterly lacking in manners and has brought utter disgrace upon our Zhong family." In an instant, the great hall fell so silent you could hear a pin drop. Everyone gasped in shock, staring in disbelief at the woman who had made such a bold claim. Both Mrs. Lian Zhong and Lu Jing were so shocked they were speechless. They tried to hold her back, but she brushed them aside. "How dare you!" Before the emperor could speak, a thunderous roar of anger echoed through the hall. Huyan Lai slammed his fist down on the table and sprang to his feet like a tiger released from its cage. His piercing gaze fixed intently on Zhong Wanrong, and a murderous aura instantly radiated from him, so intense that the minister standing closest to him could barely breathe. "Who do you think you are, daring to accuse this king's consort of being vulgar?" Huyan Lai's voice was as cold as ice shards, every word imbued with an authority that brooked no argument. "This gown is sewn from the fur of snow foxes hunted by the bravest hunters of the northern frontier. It represents the highest honor the northern frontier has to offer. You, a woman who has achieved nothing and knows only how to squabble over jealousy in the inner quarters, what do you know about honor and propriety?" Zhong Wanrong shuddered at Huyu Lai's imposing presence. The effects of the alcohol wore off almost instantly, and her face turned deathly pale. "Your Highness, the Prince of Northern Frontier, please calm your anger." Wanrong. She simply couldn't hold her liquor and was just babbling nonsense. Minister Zhong was terrified out of his wits. He fell to his knees with a thud and repeatedly bowed his head in supplication. "Can't hold her liquor?" Huyan Lai let out a cold laugh and turned to look at the emperor seated on the high throne. "Your Majesty, though our northern frontier lies far away in a bitterly cold land, we too understand the meaning of the phrase distinction between superiors and inferiors. This woman's public insult to the princess consort of the northern frontier is an insult to the entire northern frontier. If she is not severely punished, how am I to explain this to the hundreds of thousands of my people back in the northern frontier?" Huyan Lai's words rang out with force, carrying an unmistakable tone of threat. The emperor's expression also darkened. Although the northern frontier had submitted, it was a powerful military force. He could not allow the alliance between the two nations to be undermined by a foolish woman who didn't know when to back down. "Zhong Wanrong." The emperor slammed his fist on the dragon throne and roared angrily, "You, an unmarried woman, dare to speak so recklessly and insolently at a state banquet, you're simply beyond the law." "Guards!" the emperor ordered coldly. "Drag this insolent woman, who doesn't know her place, away and give her 30 severe lashes. She is to be confined to her quarters, copy the admonitions for women 1,000 times, and shall not set foot outside her room for the rest of her life without my express permission." "Have mercy, Your Majesty! Have mercy, Your Majesty!" Zhong Wanrong let out a terrified scream as she was roughly dragged out by the Imperial guards, like a dead dog. A piercing scream soon echoed from outside the hall. Each cry felt like a blow to the hearts of the Zhong family. "Mrs. Zhong rolled her eyes and fainted on the spot. Lu Jing, meanwhile, kept his head down, not daring to even glance at me, as if afraid of being implicated. I sat upright beside Huyan Lai, quietly watching the scene unfold, without so much as a frown. After the 30 lashes were administered, Zhong Wanrong was left on the verge of death. The guards tossed her, like a heap of mud, back into a corner of the women's section as if she were trash. Her gorgeous peony-patterned cloth brocade gown was already stained red with blood, and her once exquisite makeup had been smudged into a mess by cold sweat and tears. She lay face down on the ground, gasping for breath, yet her gaze, like a poison-tipped blade, was fixed intently on me. The atmosphere in the grand hall was extremely tense. The musicians had long since stopped playing, and everyone sat in complete silence, afraid of offending the emperor or angering the prince of the northern frontier, who was already in a rage. I tilted my head slightly and glanced at Huyan Lai beside me. He was holding a wine glass, staring coldly at Zhong Wanrong, who was cowering on the floor like a dog, as if she were a repulsive, stinking bug. Just when everyone thought this farce was finally over, Zhong Wanrong suddenly burst into a fit of hysterical laughter. Ha ha ha. Why? Why? She struggled to get up from the ground, pointing at me with bloodshot eyes, looking like a madwoman who had completely lost her mind. Zhong Yanren, you're nothing but a discarded pawn no one wants. You're just a worthless life meant to take the blame for me. What right do you have to wear these princess consorts' robes? What right do you have to sit there and accept people's homage? She whipped her head around, pointed at Hu Yanlai, and screamed so shrilly it nearly pierced the eardrums, "You blind barbarian from the northern frontier. The Imperial edict originally bore my name. I was the one who was supposed to go as a peace bride. This title of princess consort is mine, too. I only gave it to her because I chose not to take it myself." As soon as those words were spoken, the entire hall of supreme harmony seemed to have been silenced. Everyone stared in horror, their eyes wide, and even their breathing stopped. How dare she publicly insult the Prince of Northern Frontier? How dare she blurt out in broad daylight the secret of defying the imperial decree to take his bride's place, a crime punishable by the extermination of 9 generations of her family? Minister Zhong was so terrified his heart nearly leapt out of his chest. He shook like a leaf and scrambled toward Zhong Wanrong, trying to cover her mouth. "You disobedient daughter. Shut up at once. You're going to get our whole family killed." But Zhong Wanrong had completely lost her mind. She shoved Minister Zhong aside, pointed at the emperor seated high above, and continued to rage, "And you tyrannical ruler. What right do you have to punish me? It's obvious that your royal family needs our Zhong family to pacify this bunch of barbarians. I am the eldest legitimate daughter of the Zhong family. How dare you give all the best things to that worthless woman, who isn't even as good as a concubine's child? Crazy. Completely crazy. This is no longer just insolent talk. It is a blatant defiance of imperial authority. It is an act of high treason. You audacious ruffian. How dare you insult the sovereign and his father?" The emperor was so enraged that his whole body trembled. He sprang to his feet and hurled the wine cup in front of him to the floor. With a sharp crack, the cup shattered at Zhong Wanrong's feet, and the flying shards cut her cheek, yet she continued to laugh maniacally, as if she felt no pain at all. "Guards! Arrest this mad woman for me!" The emperor roared in uncontrollable fury. Zhong Wanrong has shown no respect for her sovereign, spoken recklessly, and insulted a prince. She is guilty of treason. Strip her of all her titles immediately, demote her to commoner status, throw her into prison, and hand her over to the Ministry of Justice for a rigorous investigation. Your Majesty, please calm down. Minister Zhong knelt and bowed his head in desperation, begging for mercy. As for the Zhong family, the emperor's cold gaze swept over Minister Zhong and Lady Zhong, who had just slowly regained consciousness. You have failed to raise your daughter properly and have allowed her to deceive the emperor and defy his authority. The Zhong family is hereby stripped of the right for 3 generations of their descendants to hold official positions in the court, and no member of the clan shall ever be appointed to public office. Guards, throw them out of the Hall of Supreme Harmony. As soon as the imperial edict was issued, the entire court was taken aback. The Zhong family is finished. With 3 generations barred from holding official positions in the imperial court, in this capital where power reigns supreme, they have been utterly cast into an abyss from which there is no return. Lu Jing watched the scene unfold, his face as pale as paper. He quickly took a few steps back, afraid of being tainted by even a shred of the Zhong family's bad luck, and the look in his eyes as he gazed at Zhong Wanrong was nothing but deep loathing and fear. This was the beloved that Zhong Wanrong had fought so hard to take away. No! I'm not crazy. This title of princess consort is mine. Zhong Wanrong was pinned to the ground by the imperial guards and struggled desperately. She turned her head and glared at me with a look of utter despair and venom. Zhong Yanren. You bitch! Give me back everything! I sat upright beside the prince, not even causing a ripple in my wine glass. I looked down at her, my gaze as calm as if I were looking at a dead person. Zhong Wanrong, you're wrong. In this world, nothing has ever rightfully belonged to you. You could have lived a peaceful life as the heiress of the Bo family. It was your own greed and foolishness that ruined everything for you. I turned my head away so I wouldn't look at her anymore. The guards dragged Zhong Wanrong out without mercy. Her piercing screams grew fainter and fainter until they finally faded into the cold, deep winter night. Minister Zhong and his wife were also driven out of the palace like stray dogs. Silence once again fell over the main hall, but a sense of tension still hung in the air. The emperor took a deep breath, made an effort to calm his anger, turned to look at Huyan Lai, and spoke in a tone laced with a hint of reassurance. The prince of the northern frontier has been startled. You need not take the ramblings of such a madwoman to heart. Huyan Lai was not provoked by Zhong Wanrong's nonsense. He clasped my hand tightly, turned to face the emperor, and spoke in a steady, resolute voice, Your Majesty, you overestimate me. I recognize only the wife standing before me. No matter who she is or where she comes from, as long as she is the woman I, Huyan Lai, have chosen, she is my sole wolf queen of the northern frontier. His words were like a reassuring balm, putting the emperor's mind completely at ease. I took his hand in mine, feeling the warmth radiating from his palm, and my heart was filled with an indescribable sense of peace. This farce has finally come to an end. A few days later, we set off on our return journey to northern Xinjiang. The moment the carriage left the capital, I pulled back the curtain and took one last look at the city that had held me captive for more than a decade. Rumor has it that Zhong Wanrong suffered unspeakable torment in the Ministry of Justice's dungeon and has been driven to the brink of madness. With the Zhong family having lost its power and influence, as the saying goes, when the tree falls, the monkeys scatter, its former glory is long gone. As for Lu Jing, he even wrote a letter breaking off their engagement overnight, completely abandoning Zhong Wanrong. None of this has anything to do with me anymore. What are you looking at? Huyan Lai wrapped his arms around me from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder. It's nothing, I said, drawing the curtains to completely shut out those painful memories. I just feel that the wind here in the capital isn't as refreshing as the breeze on the grasslands of our northern frontier. Huyan Lai chuckled softly. The vibrations from his chest traveled up my back, giving me an overwhelming sense of security. Then let's hurry back, he whispered in my ear. Aya is waiting for us to go fox hunting together. Okay. I snuggled into his arms and closed my eyes. To hell with the capital, to hell with the intrigues within the mansion, and to hell with the struggle for favor. My name is Zhong Anren. I am the princess consort of northern Jiang and the wife of Huyan Lai. My vast world lies in the north. The end.